take scotch and soda.
You will, eh? I love that.
You what?
Your fairy godmother always watches over you.
I got an uncle I'm not sure of.
I know that. Now, go ahead. Let me...
I know how you make people laugh.
You do, huh?
Yes, I certainly...
How?
This is the way.
Take your time.
He's wrong. This is the
relax
way.
yourself. Do that again. Do that again.
It's hook.
He's wrong.
Now, this is the way, isn't it? Okay. Pardon me.
Who started this thing here? Wait a minute. Come on, yeah.
Okay.
They were a hit in vaudeville shows such as A Night in Venice, and in 1930 made their first screen appearance in the Fox production Soup to Nuts. He worked on and off with Ted, calling the act Three Lost Souls, The Racketeers, and The Southern Gentlemen, as well as the Three Stooges. Shemp worked solo with RKO, doing a stooge act of his own. Here's a clip from the rare Knife of the Party.
Wait a minute, fellas. That's my new saw.
What do you want? What is this?
What do I want?
Yeah.
How do you like that?
Say, why don't you leave him alone?
Oh, stop. Don't tell me what it...
You see that?
Yeah. I'm a little too quick here, ain't I? Now, wait a minute, fellas. That's no way to open coconuts. Give me that. Why don't you use your heads? Come on, get together here. Right into it, boys. For old glory. Wait a minute. I got the piece I want.
I was wondering if y'all could tell me where I could find Mr. Gallagher.
What you want Mr. Gallagher for?
Well, I'd kind of like to talk to him about that seven pound.
About the 7 pounds. Hallelujah.
Come here.
Okay, boss. Listen, fellas, what's the matter?
We're going to have an audition.
An audition?
No, an audition. You heard me. See that girl that went upstairs?
Yeah.
We're going to give it a brush off.
Oh, the brush off.
Yeah.
Same instrument.
No, we're going to sing. Oh, you never know. That's it. Just what you You start with me. I'll break
That was a B flat.
Yeah. Sing it.
Yeah.
What do you know about music? You're talking to one of the best musicians in the country.
How are you in the city?
Oh, you boys. Listen, I'm wrong. We're not going to sing it. We're going to play it. Get the instrument. You heard me, didn't you?
Well, we could sing it.
You know on the board,
We
don't you?
sang,
Get organized now. Come on, get the jazz. Get organized.
Okay.
Ready? Right. Stop. Everything's all right, isn't it?
Yeah.
We're going to count off. 1, 2,
Button your shoe.
3, 4,
Close the door.
5, 6.
Brush your off. Oh.
The boys made nearly 200 shorts and guest appearances and features. When they weren't making pictures, they were on the road doing live shows. They worked relentlessly, all the time. The most loved stooge was Jerome, better known as Curly. Curly was described as the life of the party, and since he had very little show business experience before he joined the act, he relied on his natural personality to get him a place in the lineup. In one-on-one situations, he was reserved and somewhat difficult to get to know personally. But with his pals Mo and Larry, the little kid in him would shine. Curly was one of the few true but seldom recognized comedy geniuses. Curly's ex-wife Elaine remembers the boyish Curly and his love for animals.
Well, at one time, I remember very well, we had a little dog, and I came home, and I wasn't that crazy about dogs, and this dog went out with me for a walk, and he saw Curly coming down the street, and he ran right in front of a car and got killed in front of us both. So I kept running because I didn't want to go home, and Curly was so upset. But Mo had the brother to this dog, and he gave it to Curly, so we had another dog to go with it.
In every town the boys would perform in, Curly would buy a dog that would later wind up at home to drive his wives crazy.
Oh, Curly, I beg your pardon. He was commonly known as Curly, or his name was Babe. Mo's name for Curly, they called him Babe.
Actress Julie Gibson remembers working with Curly in Three Smart Saps.
And they said I had to marry Curly. And I was so upset because of the Three Stooges, the one I liked the least was Curly because he had a shaved head. Of course, this was pre-Kojak, and it was pre-Bald is Beautiful, Yul Brynner, you know. So I thought he was ugly with that shaved head. And the worst thing was that I guess he was so painfully shy that he really did not know how to communicate with you. So the minute they said cut, poor Curly was just, he just disappeared into the woodwork.
He was a cut-up when we were out in public, and he'd take spoons and bend them and play them to music. He was very talented musically.
Three Stooges are three living caricatures. This is how I conceived them, how I treated them. And I had a lot of very, very great help.
Gosh, Columbia had such a great, wonderful stock company at that time. There were great, wonderful, beautiful people. I'm very fortunate to have known most of them and worked with a lot of them.
Besides Jock Mahoney and the lovely Christine McIntyre, the Stooges stock company included the familiar faces of Billy Gilbert, Kenneth MacDonald, Phil Van Zandt, Bud Jameson, and the versatile Emil Sitka, who could and would do anything.
Now, the old man, on a stage, I've done it in many ways, you know. Depends on what the role called for. It could be a tragedy, a comedy, or a drama. So it wasn't too new for me to do an old man, but in this script with Jules White directing, it was Amos Flint, the first old man I did with the Stooges. Maybe you guys remember that, in all gummed up. Now, as the guy was making me up, I could feel that I was getting older and older and older, and my gosh, I had to be snappy and sassy and whatnot, and I felt it like it, and somehow, reading the script, I knew how it should fit in. I had to be cantankerous and somebody that should get slapped in the mouth or hit in the face, and I fit in with the Stooges, and it's the one time that Jules White let me do it the way I came on. Bridless Groom, that was under Ed Burns, entirely different director, entirely different approach. He allowed me to create the character, or he would give me a lot of leeway. How would you do it, Emil? And I would come up, because on a stage I did that many times. So when these Stooges start wrecking my house, and all I'm supposed to do is perform a wedding ceremony with dignity and get my cash and let them get out of there, that one line, I guess I put all the feeling I had. Hold hands, you birds. Or hold hands, you lovebirds. Hold hands, you lovebirds. People think it might have been like a circus or something like that. It wasn't. It was more like an operating room. Surgery. Believe it or not, the Stooges were real professionals, you know. They showed up to work like a workman, dressed with their hair combed back and whatnot. But once they got their suits on, I say clown suits, they were ready for what is precision timing of every scene that they're about to do. So when the lights came on, director says, all right, let everybody on a set. And that whole big crew stand still with their jobs ready to do. It was like you're going to perform surgery and everything has to be precisely timed.
And working with the Stooges was not easy. You had to maintain a severity of countenance. You couldn't let what the Stooges were doing behind you register on your face, although they were going crazy, or with whatever they were doing. You had to be straight, and the boys could do anything that they were marvelous.
Yeah, one of the things that I remember about these fellas was they were all very friendly, but once in a while when they had a scene where Mo would give them hell and start smacking them, and then they'd start smacking each other, and they would do the scene to perfection and would never hesitate. But the minute the camera stopped, then they would start swearing at each other and hating each other. I thought they were going to kill each other at times, you know.
But sometimes maybe a door was narrower than they planned to go through. Maybe sometimes the window that they were going was not quite the size. So some things would happen. And then what would take place is an argument between the Stooges. And if you think they talk like they did on the screen, you're mistaken. They used the saltiest language you ever heard. And between them, it was funnier to watch them argue about who should go first before they go through the door so that someone didn't get caught on the doorknob or whatever. or who did the right thing. That argument sometimes would go on for 5-10 minutes. Of course, they worked it out, but it was funny to watch.
They usually had the slaps and the pokes and all the good things going. And if you didn't rehearse them and you didn't, it's like choreographing a dance. Everything has to come on a cue. And you don't pull anything out of the woodwork as a surprise, because if you did, somebody got hurt. And that's not the name of the game. And as you know, they were so physical that it's very easy to get hurt.
Why don't you tell me? What? Get out. Let him alone. Oh, man. Oh!
There. But the sound effects are not in place when you're shooting. I'm doing a scene for the first time where I light a cigar. I almost did something like I'm doing here. I put the match in the light, try to light it with a cigar. But rock comes through the window. The telephone rings. I'm supposed to hear the crash of the window, feel the rock hit my foot, and do something with the telephone, all kind of sounds. And there are no sounds. I don't hear the rock come through. I don't feel the thing hit me on the foot. It's not a real rock. It's made out of sackcloth or something. And so I have several different sounds to contend with. Pretend that the phone rings and answer as if I heard it ring and it's not ringing. A window doesn't crash and so on. So it took a lot of timing to do.
We had a young man named Joe Henry, Henrie, who was pretty close to being a genius in sound effects. And he loved the Stooges and expended enormous time and effort in getting the sound effects that I believe had a great deal to do with the success of the Stooge films. He would experiment endlessly with such things as musical saws, bass drums. He would roll drums, oil drums across the cement floor to give a certain kind of rumble and pluck violin strings and make these odd sound effects. And then in editing them in, he displayed great patience and great skill. Joe Henry, the Three Stooges owe a very great deal to an unsung hero, sound effects editor, and later head of the sound effects department at Columbia, Joe Henry. Real pies were not used. They had several disadvantages. One, they'd spoil during a long, hot day's shooting. Two, they'd stain everything they came in contact with. And three, they wouldn't stand up to being thrown. Ray Hunt, who was a marvelous comedy prop man, he was the prop man on all of the Columbia two-reelers for as far back as I can remember. He used to concoct them out of a mixture of shaving cream and other things. Now, the shaving cream, for one thing, washed clean, didn't stain. Pies were generally thrown at short range. If you analyze one of the pie-throwing two-reelers, you'll find that almost all the hits were in extreme close-up. They're funnier, the closer the funnier, and the closer the more accurate the thrower was. Ray Hunt threw most of them. As I called him, our demon prop man.
When Edward Burns or Elwood Ullman or any of the other great Stooges writers would work on a script, a lot of inspiration came from just having the boys around.
I like to have the boys in on it. They seldom contributed much to structure. The structure was up to us. That would be Elwood Ullman and to me if I was writing it. But I love to have them reminiscing and telling about the things that had happened to them.
Moe was very helpful. Moe was an intelligent man compared to Curly and Larry, who were not quite as intelligent. Moe had good comedy sense. I must say this for them. They were very helpful men. They tried anything that was possible to make the picture better.
I've been a compulsive diary keeper, so I have the exact dates when a lot of these things happened. The diary said, walked on the set just in time to see Curly fold up. Well, that undoubtedly, no one knew it at the time, but that undoubtedly was the first of his strokes. I guess everyone assumed it was just a fainting spell. On his next to last film, Monkey Businessmen, it was an ordeal for everyone. We had to shoot his lines one line at a time. On the very next film he did, with Jules White as director, he passed out on the set, and that was obviously the stroke that disabled him, prevented him from doing any more work.
With Curly's stroke forcing him to leave the act, a chapter ended on the world's biggest comedy act. Curly's untimely demise faced the boys with a tremendous decision: who to replace him. Re-enter Shemp Howard. And why not? He was brother to both Moe and Curly, had been with them originally, knew all the routines, and had actively been featured in comedies since he left the act in the early 30s. Very quickly and without much fanfare, they made the transition from Curly back to Shemp in 1946.
Oh, in Bridless Groom, there was a scene that required Christine McIntyre to slap Shemp around. Well, Christine was a real lady, which to me added a dimension to the Roughneck Stooges. She had a degree in music from a music college in Chicago, and it was not in her nature to slap anyone around. But when it came to do the scene, she held back, and Shemp, after several poor takes, begged her to cut loose and really do it right. And she did.
Shemp was the funniest of them all, in my estimate. He was the type that didn't tell you what he's going to do, just like Curly. But when the cameras turned on, he put in a lot of funny stuff, especially his own, that weren't in the script.
The Stooges' popularity had not decreased, and all was well until death struck the Stooges again. On the way home from the fights, Shemp suffered a heart attack and died. Moe and Larry were once again faced with the decision of disbanding or replacing Shemp. The final 4 shorts featuring Shemp were filmed after his death using a double and stock footage, while Moe and Larry looked for a new stooge. Comedian Joe Besser joined up in 1956, bringing his big sissy character to the Roughneck Stooges. In 1958, Columbia closed the doors on its shorts department, and it looked as though the Stooges were finished. But, due to the wonders of television, by 1959, the Stooges were on top once again.
Don't look now, but I think we're about to be killed.
In 1960, director Jules White put together several Stooge shorts featuring Curly, along with ventriloquist Paul Winchell, in what was one of their first feature films. Joe DeRita, dubbed Curly Joe for his physical resemblance to Moe's brother Curly, joined the act in 1959. A seasoned burlesque performer, Curly Joe's simple style and the age of the boys themselves caused the violent slapstick to be toned down, and the emphasis was put on a more childlike type of comedy.
And let it dry. And it's really Simonized, is it? Watch this. Sure it's Simonized. Look at that shine. We'll be famous. We'll make a fortune. We'll call it Instant Simonized. Instant Simonized, you lame brains. You can already buy Instant Simonized everywhere. Instant Simonized? They thought of it too? Simonized thinks of everything. Try Instant Simonized, another easy new way to brighten your day. From Simonized Company.
The Three Stooges made a tremendous comeback and rejoined Columbia Studios for a series of feature films for the next 12 years.
What was Joe DeRita like? He was also an established comedian before, so he had his way of delivery. And he was the type of fellow that the director left alone, more or less, especially with Ed Burns. And there were things that Joe DeRita sometimes didn't like to do. And Ed Burns was the type of director that would talk to the other actors and say how to get around that. I'd give you a little example of something there. We were shooting a picture outdoors, Newport Beach. I played a society man. And I had a wife with me. We approached the waiters, the Three Stooges, and Joe DeRita is supposed to give me a rough time, sort of insulting. And my part calls for me to slap his face. And then as he gets more insulting, I do it again. And then he challenges me to do it again, and I do it again. So each time should be a little harder. You know, camera runs, and we do the take. And of course, as Joe does whatever it is, and we say, oh, yeah, I dare you to do that again. Of course, no more, and then it's bang. Terrific take. He applaud. Ed Burns laughs, and they all hung. It's very good, very good. But
Oh, no, what's this? Oh, my, not them. Yes, it's the Three Stooges who are making history, all right, but laugh history. In their first full-length feature motion picture, Have Rocket Will Travel.
There's no things on it! Duck! Try to contact
The boys had always dreamed of making features, and for many of the films to come, the veteran writers, directors, and faithful employees from the Shorts days came back to give the features the old touch.
No change in their course, huh?
None. They can't control it. The ship's on an automatic course to the planet Venus.
We got contact! Take that down, quick!
For the first time, the world's craziest comedians are really out of this world.
Or admit it. We did it. Have rocket, we'll travel in space.
You are expected. Enter.
A talking automobile.
I am waiting.
I am Larry.
I am Mo.
And I am Curly Joe.
Take us to your leader.
Say, we are going on a trip around the world. In a boat? No. In a plane? No. In a daze.
They're on the loose and on the run, and you get a passport to Pandemonium.
It's a sub. It's a plane. Let's put it in orbit. I'll drive it.
What are you, some kind of nuts?
Yeah, astronauts.
When the Three Stooges enter the race for space, everyone else runs for the hills. The first stop on their trip to the moon is a kooky spook house.
Looks like a country club for zombies.
You want to know? Swept me off my feet. I'm being carried.
When the Stooges gum up the goofy plans of a gang of gruesome Martians, who's to know who's friend or foe?
That's right! This is a red alert!
The Stooges versus Martians. Play Ring Around the Moon.
Believe me, fellas, if you take the straight and narrow, kids all over the world will look up to you.
Yeah, when we get back to Boston, we'll print picture books about you. And songs and stories.
Your names will live forever. You may even get into TV.
TV?
Yeah, transformed varmints.
Anonymous.
I'm sold. Right now, Trevor Road up and bald knob selling guns and ammunition to the Indians. Right, they're going to try to start at daybreak by morning.
The boys were now in their late 60s and were working just as hard as ever, making personal appearances, doing television shows, and cutting up in public wherever they went. It was 1969, and the Stooges were working on what was to be their last film when lovable Larry suffered a stroke that forced him to leave the act. He spent his final years in the motion picture country home and occasionally made personal appearances in schools. He even wrote a book on his life and show business. Moe, now in his 70s, was determined to continue the act, even without Larry.
And many times, in those 30 years, after Shemp died, he would say to me, he says, "You're going to be a stooge one day." I said, "Oh, come on, Moe, I'm better than that." "No," he said, "and I want you to." How it was to be or come about, I just used to dismiss as a compliment. Until, years later go, sure enough, Moe says, "What I tell you, you're going to be a stooge." The picture's in the works. It's all ready. It's planned. It's definite. It's positive. The contracts are drawn up. And sure enough, it was for the jet set to be shot in Palm Springs. I am the stooge. It's official. Now we're waiting for Moe. Moe calls and says they're shooting. They want us on a set next week, but we're going to postpone it for a week. So I'm still on with the thing, and very much so going to make a good job of it. And Joe accepted the fact. We had this meeting, and Moe says that we don't even need to rehearse because you know how to do it, and I know you're going to come up with a good character and so on. Time goes, another week, he postpones. Producer calls me, "There's something wrong with Moe?" I don't know, but I feel like maybe he should try to find out because he has a feeling something like Moe's wife calls me, puts it off another week and so on. Pretty soon another call comes. The Stooges is dead. Meaning Moe died. Come to the funeral, Amy.
Who would ever imagine that the underdogs of comedy, the Three Stooges, would be called the funniest guys in the world? Although they never achieved widespread critical acclaim, they did succeed in accomplishing what they had always intended to do. They made people laugh.
Frightening.